My wife kind of needs a new gaming computer. She's the one she's using is still holding up relatively okay. After we got a fresh Windows install on it, it hasn't been crashing too much, and it's certainly not a terrible computer. She's rocking my old computer that I built in 2014 with the AMD FX 9590, cooled by the beastly Noctua NH-D14. Amazing tower cooler, the new D15, same idea, one of the best air coolers ever made. It's got a whopping 32 gigabytes of 1600 megahertz RAM, because this was my production computer up until summer of 2016. The good old 3.5 plus 0.5 gigabyte GTX 970 graphics card that got me a nice $30 check from the class action lawsuit. And then a solid state boot drive, a 500 gig hard drive, a couple of super basic 1080p 60Hz monitors, and Fractal Design Define R5 or R4 case, because I always built in these big monolithic quiet towers before. She's, like I said, she's never had a new gaming computer or a gaming computer built with new parts. She's always had my older ones. Usually she had the AMD APU that I reviewed back in like 2012, and then I think she had my Phenom 965 Black Edition for a little bit, and now she's been on my FX 9590. And it's aging. And while her gaming needs aren't insane, most of the games she plays are Overwatch, Guild Wars 2, some Sims stuff, some Dragon Age, and again, 1080p 60Hz. Nothing too crazy. She could benefit from a little upgrade, and she also does her graduate school work on here and things like that. So I thought for her birthday, which is coming up a lot quicker than I had planned on with getting this done, thought I'd make her a new computer. So let's do that. Alright, so I've got the parts behind me here. By the way, this is the new Flexus spot. It's loud. Motorized sit-stand desk that I'm going to be reviewing soon. It's been huge for my video production, and I realize this shirt is cringeworthy. I have the parts behind me here. We have, where the platform I'm going with is the Ryzen 5 2500. It is, I think it's the 2500. I've not actually messed with Ryzen stuff. Oh, Ryzen 5 2600. It is a 6-core, 12-thread processor, 3.9 gigahertz boost clock. I've wanted to do a proper Ryzen gaming build for a little while now, and since I'm working under a fairly tight budget for my wife's build, it made the most sense to go with. I can easily overclock it, make it the X equivalent, and yada yada, so it seemed to be the best middle ground processor to go with. We've got B450M motherboard. I got her a 500 gig NVMe M.2 SSD, and then a 1 terabyte WD Blue SSD. So she has plenty of space for games and for her documents, and she does like using Shadowplay to capture some Overwatch clips from time to time, even though they don't usually go anywhere. Sometimes that eats up space, and the Sim stuff eats up a lot of space, and she'll be able to install everything and not worry about space for a little while. We've got the Dark Rock 4 tower cooler on there. We've got EVGA SuperNova 650 watt power supply, should hopefully be enough. I'm struggling to remember what I've picked out already. I went ahead and got her. Her case that she got is the DIY PC Cuboid-G, which is a green case, and that's her favorite color. A little bit of flair to it, but it's a small form factor build. It's a MATX build, I hope. Hopefully I didn't screw this up. The only two things that aren't actually new in this build are ironically the most expensive. I have some Corsair Vengeance LPX memory. It is 3000 megahertz, DDR4. Haven't checked compatibility, but it's the best RAM that I have that's not in a system. And then we're actually starting her off with a PNY reference GTX 980. Only a slight upgrade from what she has and having the 970, but it will be a little bit faster, get her a little bit of performance out of the gate, but it's not new. Wasn't in the budget to get a brand new GTX 10 series card, especially since it would have cost more than I've spent on the whole build so far. The goal is to start here with this temporarily, and then I will be getting a 20 series card through some sort of means in the studio for review and production and things like that, at which point one of the 10 series cards will be free from my main rigs and will go to her. So she'll likely get a 1080 as an upgrade from this, but we're going to start her with the 980. Hopefully don't run into any issues, but again, she's only doing 1080p 60 games. She's not even running the latest and greatest like most demanding titles. Should be fine. So we're going to go ahead and get to building, and we'll see how this goes, because I already think I got the card reader for no apparent reason, but I'm super stoked for this. I think she's going to really like it. Let's find out. The case box really says, "Be gamer." Be gamer. So that wraps it up for part selection and planning, but I did want to get just a general baseline kind of benchmark as to what her experience would be like with her old computer versus her new one, keeping in mind she doesn't play a lot of typically benchmarked games, and I didn't have a whole lot of time for this. So I used Cinebench and then Overwatch as the main benchmark. If we had more time and I wasn't trying to keep this somewhat of a surprise, we would have tried to benchmark some Guild Wars 2 World versus World. Didn't really work out, but we did get to benchmark Cinebench, which in the OpenGL got 85-ish frames per second, and then the actual CPU benchmark scored an embarrassingly low 693 on the Cinebench benchmark, which keeps it in line with a like 3rd or 4th gen i7. So it's about accurate for what you're supposed to expect, but that's all right. And then we did have some Overwatch benchmarks as well. Now, at some point, my wife set up her Overwatch settings with like medium graphics and display-based frame locking, which probably provided her the most stable overall experience, but she didn't spend a whole lot of time messing with it. She never looks at those settings. So I went ahead and kicked it up to high and did some testing. And with the automatic resolution setting, which is the render resolution of the game, which usually goes past 100% if you have a relatively powerful computer, that set it to about 140% of 1080p, which netted an average of 128 FPS and 72 FPS as the minimum, which was still up above 60 FPS, which is what is important here. If we kicked it or put it back to just base 1080p 100%, then she was averaging 134 FPS, and the minimum was 82, which is a bit nicer and a bit more stable and keeps a good frame pace. If we kicked it up to Ultra, however, it was still all right. Her average was still 82 FPS on the old machine and minimum of 43. So that is pretty cool. But once we get switched over to the new rig here, you might be impressed with some of the performance increases, even though Overwatch specifically isn't the best game of choice for benchmark. It's the one most relevant to her needs. So I give you a little tease here of the upcoming build, but we're going to wrap it here and go on and head on over to episode 2, where we cover the new build and what you can do with it. This is, of course, my first time building a Ryzen, like normal Ryzen non-APU gaming machine, and I'm pretty excited. So stay tuned, hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe for more tech education videos, and I'll see you next time.